Toei Animation have hit a YouTuber with 150 manual copyright claims. The YouTuber in question is TotallyNotMark, except it is, that's just his name. But in the space of a day, Mark lost 3 years of his life's work, as well as the vast majority of revenue required to continue running his video production company. And just to add insult to injury, in order to go through the correct appeal process to reinstate those 150 videos, well, that would take Mark over 30 years to deal with each and every claim. Look, I'm not saying that YouTube is broken, I'm saying that it was never put together in the first place. And this issue is so egregious that it has sparked commentary from sources I never expected, including Philip DeFranco and even PewDiePie. That is so much more attention than this niche usually receives, and I for one am quite thankful because my main channel is within that very same niche. I am the owner and operator of Grand Line Review, which talks exclusively about one series, that series being One Piece, and that One Piece being partially owned by Toei because they create the anime adaptation. So right now, I'll be honest, I'm pretty terrified out of my mind that I'm going to be next. But I'm also extremely heartbroken because I empathize with Mark and his team on a very core level. If I woke up to that news, it would probably destroy me. So the key issue surrounding TotallyNotMark and his videos is a term that the whole world is becoming very familiar with, which is known as fair use, or fair dealing in Mark's case because he lives in Ireland, which is essentially the very vaguely defined legal term for being allowed to use copyrighted content for a wide variety of purposes. Such purposes include review and criticism, which is what we're going to focus on here, because that's what Mark primarily does. He reviews anime and manga in exceptional depth, and to be honest, he's one of the best we have at it. His long-form reviews are both insightful and exciteful. The second word there being something that I just made up to describe the feeling of being excited for the piece of media that someone is reviewing. Because it was a while ago, but I remember One Piece receiving a huge online boom when Mark began reviewing it. And I have no doubt that he was responsible for igniting or reinvigorating interest in One Piece within tens of thousands of people all around the world. And that's just One Piece. Mark has also extensively covered Dragon Ball, Hunter x Hunter, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and really just other stuff that takes his fancy. So the problem: his reviews use a lot of anime clips and screenshots. Like, a lot. And in my opinion, he does so in a completely transformative way because those clips are removed from their original context, they don't replace the original, and are only used to serve the point or critique that Mark is making. You know, and sort of like a review. However, Japan is, well, it's tricky when it comes to the concept of fair use because it does not exist. There is no gray area for using third-party content in Japan. You either have express permission to do so, or you don't, and you get arrested and sometimes literally thrown in jail. That is a thing that actually happened recently. But the main issue we have is determining whether a company based in one country has jurisdiction over a media critic in another country operating on a distribution platform in a third country. Those countries being Japan, Ireland, and the United States respectively. Wow, who would have thought that international copyright law could be such a mess? Because here's the thing, Toei is a company who have probably informed part of your childhood. My generation at the very least would have grown up with either Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, or both, but they are a truly prolific studio. And they have every right to restrict their content in Japan under Japanese law. In theory, they don't have that right elsewhere, because they sell and distribute their product in other countries, and when you're doing business in other countries, you generally need to follow their laws when doing so. Like, I would never expect to set up shop in Japan and tell their government, well, this is how we do things in good old Australia. The problem, like another problem, the law doesn't actually have much to do with the situation, and this is where things get quite painful. But if a company wants to make a copyright claim via YouTube, then they have this many options. The first of which is to issue a DMCA takedown. DMCA being the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This action is incredibly harsh and it often results in strikes being issued to the channels in question. And just as a reminder, if you get 3 strikes, your channel is terminated without question. Which is fun, you know, it makes for a very edge of your seat career on YouTube. But most importantly, it activates a legal procedure that can result in the rights holder and the content creator going to court, which is not an ideal option for anyone involved, which is I suppose why in all of their copyright claim history, which is extensive, I have some of my own, but Toei has never once escalated things to that level. However, thanks to this YouTube, they now have a second option, which is the Content ID system. And in layman's terms, that means that a media empire can upload their content into a database somewhere, which YouTube then uses to perform a fancy scan of every video on the platform, and if it detects something, then it will notify the company, who can then choose to take manual manual action. And fun fact, YouTube also does this for content creators. So for example, here's my content ID notifications that come to me directly from the YouTube. Some of these people have used parts of my video, or in particularly bold cases, re-uploaded an entire video. Whatever the case, from here I can choose whether or not I want to issue a content ID claim against them. Same thing with Toei, but on a much bigger scale. Now in some ways, content ID claiming is much friendlier to creators because it doesn't automatically result in copyright strikes, meaning that we don't so much have to fear our channels being deleted overnight. Not so much, though the fear is always there. However, here is the big kick in the nuts. The content ID system is not actually a legal framework. It's designed to sound like one, it has very fancy words, but it's purely a system that operates under the rules of YouTube as a business enterprise. And those rules are: a rights owner chooses to issue a content ID claim. The content creator can then choose to appeal this. That appeal then goes directly to the rights owner, who has 30 days to decide whether or not the appeal should stand. That's right, it's up to the entity that made the claim in the first place to judge the appeal of the claim. And geez, I wonder what they're usually going to say about that. It's kind of like being taken to court by your neighbor, only to discover that your neighbor is not only the plaintiff, but also the judge. Things probably aren't going to work out in your favor. But after that completely pointless process, which does nothing but waste content creators' time, it then gets escalated to the original system of filing a DMCA takedown. And one of the biggest problems with this is that you can only appeal this many videos at a time, this many being one. And that one video appeal can take up to 2 months under YouTube's current system, meaning that the vast majority of people currently living on this planet will likely be dead by the time that Mark has gone through the appeals process for all 150 of his videos. Because we're talking, 30 to 40 years or so, and that's only if everything goes well. But we also should not forget our second mustache-twirling villain here, which is YouTube itself. The content ID system, again, is not a legal framework. These are the rules that this company has chosen to operate under. It is completely within their control, and they consistently choose to do absolutely nothing. So what we have here is an exploitable system from one company being exploited by another company, and in the middle we have Mark getting thoroughly spit roasted. And at this point, we as creators have no recourse whatsoever other than to make noise, a lot of noise, which has been happening. If you take a look at Toei's social media, it is flooded with comments reposting Mark's video and demanding that his other videos are reinstated, and Toei are being so thoroughly called out that I genuinely feel bad for whoever has to manage those accounts. But I feel a lot worse for Mark and his team. I honestly don't know how he can seem so calm about this. What Toei has done and what YouTube continues to allow is tantamount to harassment, in my opinion. I can't even imagine the toll this is taking on Mark's mental health. And potentially in the future, I won't have to imagine it because I may also very well be living it. But here is the worst part. That's right, we haven't even done the worst part yet. I am lucky enough to have a YouTube partner manager. Her name is Redacted. She's an absolutely lovely lady, very enthusiastic, empathetic, hard worker, and always on my side. But even with that, there is nothing we can do. I've explored every avenue of this issue with her. She has even contacted YouTube Japan on my behalf, where we were told that Japanese companies have no concept of fair use and they're not about to start considering it now. Apparently, the best that AnyTube can hope for is some sort of future compromise with these companies, and the example brought up was a program that currently exists with the NBA, where YouTubers can use NBA content in their videos in exchange for a whopping 50% of their entire channel's income. And to put that into some perspective, remember that YouTube takes 45% of all ad revenue before we see any of it. Cool. So with what's left, you then need to give away 50% to a company, even though you are legally within your rights to use their content under fair use. But then what Mark and all of the rest of us foreigners have to do is we get to pay tax to the United States, because that's where the platform is based and that's the cost of doing business in the USA. And I guess that does make sense, because even though I'm Australian, I have to follow the law of the country where I'm doing business. Funny that. And then finally, we pay tax in our own countries, and I guess there's some leftover income after all of that, maybe. And I suppose the point I'm getting at is that if we're paying tax to the United States, and if YouTube as a company is already taking 45% of our revenue, is it really too much to ask that they, step up and at least implement a system to protect us under, say, the legal system in the country where we pay tax and the company is also based? In the meantime, look, I don't know how this will turn out, but please do go and support TotallyNotMark. It doesn't matter what he's reviewing, it's all good stuff.